Alright, so in this video, we thankfully won't have to look at me. So there's that. And this is going to be a quicker one. It's quick and sweet. So looking at ONET, which is one of the official websites for looking at different occupations and stuff. Um, just for people who are still trying to find, their job that they really like, that they want to develop into, or whatever, or the job that they want to get better at and stuff. Um, and yeah, so so that's one of the sites for that. I'm sure there's plenty of good ones and stuff. Though the more general you go, you might lose some details and stuff. U.S. residents, you want to stick to sites like ONET, ONET, you know. Um, so yeah, but you see, the key crucial factor, one of the key crucial factors in learning and performance and stuff, um, that currency that touches on things like performance IQ and skills development and skills expression and stuff. Not necessarily skills expression and how you express in your body and stuff, because I understand that there are so many, maybe even too many disabled people that are excellent at their jobs and great and stuff. Um, they, uh, you know, these occupations are basically just, well, the good ones at least. They're generalized in um, in in terms of the capacities they require and stuff. So a person has to understand to cultivate these capacities and stuff. Ideally, economically speaking, economic personnel, they should be actually they should not try to be interdisciplinary and stuff, but they should, you know, they should be able to pay different kinds of attention, understand it and stuff. So here we have visual capacity and visual skills occupations. Um, these occupations require you to have mental imagery and stuff, meaning that you can't talk or write your way out of things and stuff. Like you need to have an idea of what you're doing, because there isn't time to talk or correspond and stuff. Um, because addressing things verbally can lead to visual discounting errors and stuff. For example, you're working as a mechanic and stuff, you don't have good visual skills and stuff, that car could fall on somebody, or that jack could fail and cause a lot of damage and stuff. You can end up with a serious problem and stuff. So yeah, the mechanical occupations are certainly under that umbrella and stuff, because for that you definitely need to have a good eye and stuff. And if you have really good visual spatial memory and stuff, that's just a bonus and stuff. Memory for images and video and stuff like that. Um, a person needs to make sure they have very good visual processing and stuff, because it can impair interacting with other people and some aspects of learning and stuff. It could lead to an incidental or even long-term, even chronic nonverbal learning disability and stuff. That which can lead to a lot of complications and stuff. Um, I talked about my video about people who miss details and stuff. Yeah, so this is truth, people. Anyway, so here we have the planning heavy occupations, like for example, civil planning and stuff. Like here, this is going a step further and stuff, because like your idea needs to apply to reality and stuff. So like, and you might even have research and development and stuff. Your mind has to visually break up a lot of pieces and do it and stuff. You know, Even like with fantasy novel writing and stuff, you have to have a good idea of things to write and stuff if you're genuinely writing novels and stuff. I I know that AI can write some great novels and stuff, but like this is just something different. It's just not what we're talking about. We're just not addressing AI and stuff here. I'm not really yet an AI expert and stuff, so I'm just sticking to what I know here. Okay. There, so here so here we have the emotional occupations. These occupations where you can be emotional and force the issue, and things you actually can get better results and stuff. Um, you know, uh, Delivery person, acting and stuff. Those are some examples of these jobs. Um, Stuntman, um, some forms of dance and stuff. Um, because dance, like, I know I don't mention it a lot. I'm just not an expert in it and stuff. And um, but what I do know is that some forms of dance are just very concept heavy. Like you're taking concepts, like ideas, techniques from dance, and you're combining in a way to come up with a composition, or you're learning a composition for a performance as a billable activity because you want to support yourself as a dancer and stuff. And then of course um, there's another type of dancing, which is of course the most important type. Um, yeah. So it's a very commendable. It's an old profession, arguably the world's oldest and stuff, but it is very commendable. Very commendable, very important. So here we have what's called the practical muscular occupations. So the construction-related occupations here, they, I mean, this sometimes could be an emotional occupation and stuff, but like you really do expect these are like a whole level of difficult and stuff. This you have to have the mental currency of grit and stuff. Like you have to have grit, and you got to willing to really do the work and focus and stuff, and um and have the mental resilience to go through it. um, whether you're an iron worker or you're, God forbid, a bricklayer and stuff, because bricklaying occupations could get pretty bad. It, um, where iron worker, bricklayer and stuff, where you're doing like high capacity deliveries and stuff, or you're um, what are some occupations where muscle is a currency? And they're very practical. Or you're a you're erecting houses and stuff. Um, yeah, these are some examples of the occupations where you need like that mental asset of like being practical and gritty and stuff. Here you have the language-based occupations and stuff. This is um, you know in terms of the literature and stuff. These are more based in some of these are based in intelligence and stuff, like general intelligence or general mental capacity and stuff. Though there are occupations that connect with the other factors too and stuff. Like you have you know language-based occupations here, and then like it's a star bus here. Here it forms a star bus, and oh, horrid. Looks horrid. Oh my God. Catastrophe. What is? Oh my God. This is horrible. Hold on. That looks terrible. That looks terrible. Oh, there we go. We have our star bus, but we just don't have this linkage. Where is it? Okay. And then, occupations here. And then, of course, there's also the central occupations and stuff. This is for people who think in terms of their senses, for the most part. Like, this is where their concentration is and stuff. I'm not saying, like, this is their entire mental character, but, like, this is what gets used the most and stuff. This is where you really get a nose, or you get an ear and stuff. Um, I don't know what examples of that could be offhand and stuff. Maybe some forms of archery. I don't know. Archery is still pretty important and stuff. I would, so yeah, a lot of central occupations could be good and stuff. So we're just going to say that each line here is 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 occupation that has multiple refers to patients that use multiple capacities listed. And we can have any number of these connected and stuff, so we should probably do some labeling here. A cluster, B cluster here. Oh, isn't this coming together so nicely? We made the analysis so fine that we can, write quite a bit, didn't we? Wonderful. This is coming together rather wonderfully, actually. Oh. I was missing an arrow here. Oh no. People ask me, Daniel, did you watch Green Arrow? I say, I don't even know how to use my arrows. Whoop. Christ almighty and tidy whities. So, oh. Oh my god. Okay. Whoop. The old Dr. Ting is rolling in his grave right now at how foolish I'm being. Okay. Foolish, foolish. This is almost foolish, but anyway, yeah, so we have the connections here and stuff, and you can look at the occupation types while I, kind of walk through them and discuss them. Of course, we have emotional occupations that connect here, but they don't necessarily connect to practical, resilient ones. Ooh. Visual and central occupations. Ooh, this is an interesting area. It's almost a totally nonverbal occupation and stuff. Probably a very rare category, but hey, it's there. Da-da-da. Look at this. But see, what this doesn't become a graph theoretic construct. No. This is actually a relational construct and stuff, because these things are linked by a connection and stuff. The connection is that they share details and stuff. So the logical language that emerges is, it expresses itself the way it is. It's more of a something like this, like math and analytic type thing, which is so it's just going into it and stuff. E cluster, D cluster, B cluster, C. And then this is like another category of E and stuff. Because dealing with people is a whole other ball game and stuff. Like it really makes it makes a lot of the time constructive language fails. You got to use effective language and stuff, which is totally like but okay, so all right, so here from the language-based occupations, you have these constructive languages here. They're being referenced. Constructive languages are languages that always have the same meaning because they generally always refer to the same thing and stuff. Meaning that at the most challenged form of the concept, they only extend so far as to what their permitted meanings are, like with numbers and mathematical symbols and stuff. Like with mathematical symbols, there's many ways to sum, right, and stuff, but there's just one summing operator, generally speaking, and stuff. That plus sign has a limited range of meaning before you're no longer summing and stuff, and there's just too much of other stuff going on there. So there's that. Programming intensive occupations. Yeah, it's a different type of language and stuff, constructive language occupations. What's an idea of a constructive language occupations and stuff? I mean, definitely a lot of areas of philosophy are like that and stuff, and definitely the when it comes to legal professions, which is a very philosophical profession and stuff, you're using language that can only be interpreted so far, and so like there's a range of legal interpretation, but um, you the precedents and stuff and the legal education are pretty clear on how the law is supposed to be read. Like you don't there's plain meaning, and then there's its own neighborhood there and stuff that there's variations on plain meaning that are more sophisticated, less sophisticated and stuff, and you know yeah so because there's guiding principles of the law that have purpose to it. Anyway, so this is not a video about the law and stuff. So uh, and again, mind you, I'm not a legal expert and stuff, so don't take that as like some canonical fact to go off of and stuff. Use that to inspire you and stuff, and just say like, hey, this guy's philosophical opinion on this because he's trying to teach the subject and stuff. Um, but that is not a guiding principle. That is not guiding information or legal advice and stuff, and I would never tell anybody that. So, anyway, so language-based occupations, yeah, the categorical reasoning occupations, meaning that language here and stuff, um, it can still be constructive, but the construction is something that's totally limited to the documentation and the person's imagination of what the word means. It's not necessarily what's going on in reality and stuff, meaning it's not in agreement with, a visual capacity and stuff. Um, it's not an agreement necessarily agreement with reality-based language occupations. Like, for example, occupations that require a lot of street smarts and stuff. Like, um, there's a few occupations out there that require you to understand what's really going on at the present time and what people are doing and stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of these occupations are malicious. They involve harassment and wrongful surveillance and stuff. It's just the unfortunate part of reality. And so, thankfully, we have the law to back us up and protect us and stuff. And thankfully, people that believe in the guiding principles of the law and stuff, the harm deterrence and the you know uh, the encouragement of good behavior and stuff in the law, and um, the law also manages adverse actions too and stuff. So yeah, so we're able to remove and combat and take all sorts of adverse actions against some people in street smarts occupations that just want to drive people crazy basically. Or just do things that are illegal to a very bad implication and stuff. Um, so we're not talking about people parking crooked. We're talking about um, you know, potentially breaking laws that would invalidate things like administrative violence and stuff. Um, so so the wrongful administrative violence and stuff. Because so heavily political desk and document called. So yeah, so categorical reasoning and stuff. There's definitely a discrepancy between what's understood at the desk and what's going on in the quote unquote boots on the ground level and stuff. Which makes it different than the constructive, the constructive and analytical language occupations and stuff. Analytical languages involve logical relations and everything. Um, it's not qualitative like human language and stuff. You're thinking about figures and you're thinking about um, and you're being it's an exaction and stuff. It's part of an exaction process. Can human language do that? Sure, but you would need to uh, really term language differently and stuff. Like lecture format language and stuff is pretty constructive and stuff. There's not much is lost in translation there. Um, and yeah, so I mean, I'm I mean, we can essential occupations aren't really discussed here and stuff, um, but they involve understanding how humans sense and feel things and stuff. I mean, um, what's an example like uh, deep tissue massage, I guess, and some things. You know, that type of thing. I mean, there's actually quite a few occupations there, um, and yeah. So I mean, with this, I mean, you kind of understand um, what's your different billable mental capacities, your economically related mental capacities in terms of you know how it impacts your life outcomes and stuff, because it's going to impact your finances and everything and stuff. Um, these pretty much cover every possible thing a person can do and stuff. Like there's little to no occupations for just pure complex information and stuff, which is a vastly um, which is a very vast topic that takes quite some time to talk about. I've been writing a book on the topic, and I think it's gonna bring some cool things to light that are going to help people you know get the most out of their brain and stuff, and watch their lives become awesome as possible because of how their brain is modifying their address of material and personnel, and because that's essentially, I mean, I know this is kind of divergent, but that's essentially what the brain does. It is a modifier of how circumstances are addressed. Circumstances comprising of material and personnel, like people and stuff. Um, in addition to that, it's also a type of recording and playback device and stuff. It works on something like a variation of the GIGO principle and stuff. GIGO meaning garbage in, garbage out and stuff. The brain, it has a certain oscillation rate and stuff. The pulsation rate is has is has a certain pulsation rate and stuff, and then different areas of the brain can run at different frequencies and stuff. So depending on chemical factors and other exposure factors and stuff. So the so and again, I understand this is this digression, but this is a very, very important topic. Um, so because it's a recording and playback device, it's gonna take in information at a certain rate and stuff, and it can populate things for language-based occupations, or these practical occupations, or emotional occupations, essential occupations, visual capacity occupations. So it's gonna do that in your deliberate consciousness to construct these things and stuff, and then um, based on the manner of exposure, you can have different reactions based because your brain's linked to your nervous system. So um, this is this is what makes emotional experience, and this is where belief comes in and stuff, uh, or perceptions, reactions. Reactivity is generally not good for the most part. Um, and but anyway, uh, going back to the brain as a recording and playback device and stuff, um, the brain plays back and stuff because it's part of this cycle that the nervous system goes through. This can be for genetic reasons or because of training and stuff. Like for example, I talked about the bricklaying occupation and stuff and how that's bad and stuff. If you're just a bricklayer and stuff, you basically you get trained on this repetitive simple motion, which causes overuse, injury, and rots out your brain and stuff. You do significant psychological and physical damage to you and stuff. Um, and it can you know it can make waste of a person's other capacities, unfortunately, and stuff. Um, so all of the investment of that time and energy and resources to building that person up to their life and stuff pretty much goes to waste because none of the benefits of that expenditure really get realized because this person just became um, those things. Thankfully we have medical science and stuff to enhance people's functionality. We have psychotherapy and stuff to get people out of their perceptions of themselves and everything. And there's many other greater powers at work that help and stuff. Um, but I've spoken quite at length about this topic, and yeah, we're at almost 25 minutes and stuff. So um, yeah, we'll just leave that there.